Homeland Security just tore apart a Florida-Bahamas cartel pipeline where migrants were charged $35,000 a head and kids were forced to ride alongside piles of.
On board, we're told, is a total of 370 pounds of and 30 Chinese nationals, including 2 children. Sheriff Richard Del Toro writing, "We won't tolerate criminals using our shores as their pathway. Our county will not be a gateway for criminal enterprises."
We do have a border here in Florida. It's our coastline.
This entire smuggling pipeline was run like a business. Think Airbnb headquarters, counter-surveillance teams posted on Florida beaches, and families paying life savings for a lifetime of slavery. And the deeper you look, the scarier it gets, because this is just a part of a wider storm already building off America's coast. The first weekend of September 2025 looked like a luxurious getaway on Florida's Treasure Coast. A rented Airbnb in Fort Pierce, men moving in with bags, cars pulling up late at night. The neighbors thought they were tourists ready to fish or party, but Homeland Security had a different kind of intel. Reportedly, this was a command center for an international cartel operation.
Their plans began just one day prior when investigators say they learned a group of men had rented an Airbnb in Fort Pierce, planning to, quote, travel to the Bahamas to retrieve drugs and smuggle undocumented immigrants into the United States.
Instead of beach chairs and coolers, agents tracked maps, burner phones, and coded conversations. The smugglers were living among regular families, exploiting the same rental platforms anyone would use for a summer vacation. Homeland Security said this was no sloppy crew. It was methodical, calculated, and brazen enough to hide in plain sight like that.
They learned all 3 boats would be returning from the Bahamas to the inlet.
The plan was bold. 3 boats, each between 33 and 42 feet, would leave Fort Pierce Inlet before dawn, head straight into Bahamian waters, and return loaded with cocaine and migrants. And as it turns out, Airbnb was just one piece of a network. Cartel scouts were already stationed on beaches to act as counter-surveillance, ready to tip off the boats if law enforcement appeared.
5 men from the Bahamas were found on the boats and arrested, along with 3 people on land, acting as counter-surveillance.
The brazenness stunned even seasoned deputies. They weren't just watching a smuggling pipeline unfold. At this point, that's their day-to-day job. This time, they were watching this cartel pipeline being engineered like a corporate operation, with backups, redundancies, and enough money on the line to treat human beings as cargo. Think about that for a second. A rented vacation home turned into a war room, coordinating a multi-boat fleet worth millions. DHS would learn the migrants had already wired tens of thousands for passage. White powder loads were all prepped for American streets. All it would take was one smooth trip across the water. But there was one detail no one could explain when the boats were finally intercepted. Why were 2 children placed on top of hundreds of pounds of coke? Before sunrise, federal agents lined the Fort Pierce Inlet, watching the water for their targets. They knew 3 boats were coming back from the Bahamas. They just didn't know if they'd all return at once.
As 3 boats departed from the Fort Pierce Inlet, St. Lucie County Sheriff investigators, along with several state and federal agencies, were ready and waiting for their return.
2 vessels slowed as lights hit them, but a third suddenly throttled forward, racing to break the net. That was the moment every agent knew this was a high-stakes play. When they caught the fleeing boat, DHS agents found bricks stacked like cargo, and Chinese migrants packed shoulder to shoulder.
On board, we're told, is a total of 370 pounds of cocaine and 30 Chinese nationals, including 2 children.
Authorities later admitted the kids weren't there by accident. It's all a part of cartel's dark game. Smugglers often use children as human shields, betting U.S. agents won't risk ramming or firing. In other cases, those same children grow up indentured to the very cartels that traffic them, forced to repay debts that never end.
They're using children as human shields in these operations.
DEA Special Agent Kevin Bobbitt also explained that this wasn't the work of a Mexican cartel. If El Mencho or Los Chapitos have a hand in it, it's the Chinese mafia that's at the helm.
Obviously, it's criminal organizations in Southeast Asia and China that are bringing them.
So now, Homeland Security had some 30 people, confused and afraid, in detention. Their first question, why had these families risked everything, and who had convinced them to climb aboard? The answer was somehow worse than they expected. Every seat on that boat had been sold at a cartel price tag of $35,000.
Traffickers flying commercially into the Bahamas, then paying about $30,000 to $35,000 per person to be smuggled into South Florida by boat.
Yeah, during the peak of Trump's immigration crackdown, these families are getting smuggled into the United States. But it's not to taunt anyone. They're misinformed and deeply manipulated by cartels. For some, the promise was steady work in America. For others, it was the dream of asylum. But in reality, the deal was closer to a ransom. The price tag guaranteed nothing except more control. DHS veteran Oscar Hagel-Sieb explains,
"These individuals are not necessarily your run-of-the-mill illegal immigrants that are coming in, to find work. A lot of them are individuals that have a lot to lose by getting caught."
Sadly though, they lose a lot once they do make it into the US too. Once in US waters, many discover they aren't free at all. Those who can't repay their smuggling debts get pulled into cartel labor pipelines, working under-the-table jobs, running drugs, or, for women and forced into illegal street work. Every golden ticket promise becomes a leash. Agents called it an international conspiracy, stretching from China to the Bahamas to Florida.
This is part of a larger international conspiracy investigation that my office is running right now.
And with each trip netting millions, the real question wasn't how these passengers got here. It was who was collecting at the top of the pyramid. What happened in Fort Pierce's waters wasn't a lucky traffic stop. It was the result of a super coordinated strike that pulled together nearly every badge with jurisdiction over Florida waters.
So with help from U.S. Customs and Border Protection, Air and Marine Operations, Homeland Security, Florida Fish and Wildlife, and the Florida Highway Patrol, they set their plans in motion.
Yeah, you heard right. Even Florida Fish and Wildlife. Because wildlife also suffers when cartels pollute their waters with drugs and ammo. Sheriff Richard Del Toro made it clear this was bigger than just his county. "We won't tolerate criminals using our shores as their pathway. Our county will not be a gateway for criminal enterprises. I'm proud of the teamwork and tenacity shown by all the local, state, and federal agencies involved." Behind the scenes, federal agents were already treating the case as part of a conspiracy stretching far beyond the Bahamas. When DEA Special Agent Kevin Bobbitt said this,
"This is part of a larger international conspiracy investigation that my office is running right now."
He explained that his team is pulling tons of cocaine and confused migrants every week from Florida waters, and they're all tied to the same cartel. Just hours after the 3 boats were stopped, a 4th one came out.
And another 125 kilos of cocaine on it.
He says all 4 vessels are tied to an international drug trafficking organization.
Federal officials stressed that the coordination was essential because, without joint task forces, these kinds of multi-boat runs slip through gaps in jurisdiction. The Coast Guard put it in stark terms. The Coast Guard continues to safeguard our borders with our state, federal, and international partners to stop illegal maritime migration voyages and to prevent the unnecessary loss of life at sea. But while officials praised the teamwork, the real question lingered. The men arrested on the boats and beaches were just one layer of the network. The brokers in China, the organizers wiring money through shell companies, the cartel-linked enforcers operating in Nassau, none of them were in handcuffs. As one DHS veteran explained in another interview, corruption greases these pipelines.
That is a major concern. It's the bribery, the corruption that is prevalent in Mexico cities, not just on the border. There is corruption with American authorities also.
So while 30 migrants sat in U.S. detention with uncertain futures, the masterminds who pocketed millions were likely already safe overseas, beyond the reach of local sheriffs or Coast Guard cutters. And that's the real issue. Every time one pipeline is disrupted, another begins taking shape. The Chinese mafia and Mexican cartels, working hand in hand, are probably designing new methods every day, just in case they lose one. And the latest report shows Florida's coastline is only the first front in a rising tide of maritime smuggling. The numbers don't lie. While the headlines keep focusing on the southern border, traffickers are quietly shifting to the water. Land seizures are actually falling at a fast rate, and that's often celebrated on U.S. news. But the trend at sea is the exact opposite. In less than 7 months, federal agents already logged over 800 maritime and air seizures, almost eclipsing the entire previous year.
Last year, Air and Marine Operation agents recorded just over 1,000 seizures. This year, by July alone, they've already logged more than 800, about 80% of last year's total. If that pace holds, 2025 will far surpass last year's numbers.
Kevin Bobbitt said it's all down to the massive profits cartels make from this business.
It's not going to slow down anytime soon. The profits are too high.
And here's where it gets ironic. This spike on sea is the direct consequence of the southern border crackdown.
Land, sea, and air. And with land routes being more restrictive at this point, sea and air are the way to go.
Every time walls go up or patrols increase in Texas and Arizona, traffickers reroute, and right now, the easiest detour is through the Bahamas. Lax immigration rules there mean anyone can fly in, and once they arrive, the cartels are waiting with offers.
What we've seen is the Bahamas has really relaxed a lot of their immigration, and so people are going there as kind of a launching point to get here to the United States.
That's why authorities are warning the public in the Florida Keys to expect more than boats, and it's hardly just warnings anymore. Every week, packages of coke and marijuana are already washing up on beaches, tossed overboard when smugglers are chased.
Over the past few weeks, it's been at least there's been 1 to 2 per week. It's been a pretty steady flow, ranging anywhere from, 1 brick of it to 50 plus bricks of it.
Locals are told not to touch what they find because 1 brick could contain fentanyl. That danger, the randomness of finding cartel drugs on a morning beach walk, shows how porous the coastline has become. And if a 3-boat flotilla carrying 30 migrants and 370 pounds of cocaine could almost slip through Fort Pierce, what happens when 5 or 10 or 20 boats push across in a single weekend? For years, the border meant the Rio Grande or Arizona's deserts, but sheriffs along Florida's coast say that definition is outdated.
We do have a border here in Florida. It's our coastline.
That coastline border now stretches 1,350 miles. Every inlet, marina, and dock is a potential cartel crossing point, and traffickers know all of them. The Coast Guard warned, anybody attempting to enter the United States illegally by sea will be interdicted and deported to their country of origin or departure. And that's why this sheriff says he's been working hard to strengthen the relationships between departments.
When I came into office, those relationships had been pretty much severed. We were not working on any task force with the DEA, FBI, US Marshals. We've kind of revitalized all of those.
Translation, it takes all the strength they have to even stand a chance against a transnational cartel that keeps adapting and evolving. A seat costs $35,000 today. Tomorrow, it could be more. Or worse, it could be open to buyers no one wants slipping in. And that raises the final question. If cartels can move desperate families across the Atlantic for $35,000 a head, what's to stop them from offering the same service to violent felons or foreign extremists with cash to burn? It's not like cartels ever had a moral compass. And once the Atlantic turns into an open highway, the stakes aren't just about bricks washing up on beaches. It's about who else has already made it into the US while Homeland Security is hunting the wrong people.